The months following the Kellyan retreat brought both progress and uncertainty. Earth was slowly healing, but the scars of war remained visible in every corner of the planet. Buildings were being rebuilt, fields replanted, and communities reformed, yet the shadow of the invasion lingered. People worked tirelessly to restore their lives, but questions about the future weighed heavily on their minds. Would the Kellyans return? And if they did, would humanity be ready? John Carter stood on a hill overlooking what was once a bustling town in Montana. It was a patchwork of ruins and makeshift shelters. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke from distant fires still smoldering after weeks of cleanup efforts. John's hands rested on his hips as he surveyed the scene, his expression a mix of pride and concern. The people here had shown incredible resilience, working together to rebuild despite the odds. But he knew that survival required more than determination, demanded preparation. Rachel Meyer joined him a moment later, carrying a clipboard filled with notes. She had spent the morning coordinating supply deliveries and organizing work crews. Her face was streaked with dirt, but her eyes shone with purpose. "We're making progress," she said, glancing at the activity below. "But we need to think bigger. If the Kellyans come back, we can't rely on guerrilla tactics alone." John nodded, his thoughts mirroring hers. "We've got some of their tech now. It's time to use it not just to rebuild, but to defend ourselves. We need something that can stop them before they even reach the ground." Rachel agreed, and together they began brainstorming ideas. They reached out to Laura Bennett, who had been traveling across the globe, sharing her insights about the Kellyans. When she arrived at their camp a few days later, she brought news that reignited their sense of urgency. Scientists studying the captured alien technology had uncovered a critical weakness. The Kellyan ships relied on a specific frequency to maintain their energy shields. If they could disrupt that frequency, they might render the invaders' defenses useless. "This is our chance," Laura said, spreading diagrams and schematics across a table in John's cabin. "If we can build a device to jam their shields, we'll have the upper hand. But it won't be easy. We'll need materials we don't have and expertise we're still developing." John leaned forward, studying the plans. "Then we'll find the materials and the people. Nothing's impossible if we work together." With renewed focus, the Resistance shifted its efforts toward constructing a prototype weapon capable of disabling Kellyan ships. Alex Rivera played a key role in this endeavor, using his knowledge of alien technology to guide the project. Worked alongside engineers and technicians, piecing together components scavenged from abandoned military bases and repurposed Kellyan equipment. The process was slow and fraught with challenges, but the team refused to give up as the weapon took shape. Word spread of their efforts. Survivors from neighboring regions traveled to the camp, eager to contribute. Some brought supplies, while others offered their skills or volunteered for testing. Among them was a young woman named Mia Torres, a former drone operator who had lost her family during the invasion. Her expertise in piloting proved invaluable when the team realized they needed a way to deploy the weapon effectively. "We can modify one of the commandeered Kellyan fighters," Mia suggested during a strategy meeting. "It's fast, stealthy, and already equipped with systems that can interface with their technology. If we load the jamming device onto it, we can strike directly at their fleet." The idea was risky, but it offered the best chance of success. John assigned Mia to lead the flight team, knowing her experience made her the ideal candidate for such a dangerous mission. Together with Alex and a small crew, she worked tirelessly to retrofit the alien ship, integrating the jamming device into its systems. Every step of the process was painstaking, requiring precision and creativity. Mistakes weren't an option. Failure meant leaving Earth vulnerable to another attack. While the technical work continued, Laura focused on gathering intelligence. Using data recovered from the mothership, she tracked patterns in Kellyan movements, searching for signs of their return. Her analysis revealed troubling news. Remnants of the Kellyan fleet were regrouping near the edge of Earth's solar system. Though weakened, they appeared to be preparing for another assault. "They're not giving up," Laura told John and Rachel during a late-night briefing. "Their resources are stretched thin, but desperation makes them dangerous if we don't Act soon, they'll hit us harder than before. The gravity of the situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Everyone understood the stakes. This wasn't just about defending Earth. It was about ensuring humanity's survival. John turned to Rachel, his voice steady but urgent. We need to strike first. Hit them where it hurts and send a message they won't forget. Rachel nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. If we launch an assault on their regrouping point, we can disrupt their plans and buy ourselves more time. But we'll need every available fighter and someone willing to lead the charge. Without hesitation, John stepped forward. I'll do it. I've fought them before, and I know what they're capable of. If anyone can pull this off, it's me. His decision sparked a wave of determination among the survivors. Volunteers signed up in droves, eager to join the mission. Pilots trained tirelessly, practicing maneuvers in the commandeered Kellyan fighters. Ground teams prepared explosives and traps to cover the aerial assault. Supplies were rationed carefully, ensuring everyone had enough food and ammunition for the journey. Ahead, on the day of the mission, the air buzzed with anticipation. Dozens of ships lined up on a makeshift runway carved into the wilderness, their engines humming softly. John stood at the front of the group, addressing the assembled fighters. His words were simple but powerful. Today, we take the fight. To them, today we show them that Earth isn't theirs to take. Stick to the plan, watch each other's backs, and remember why we're doing this. For our families, for our homes, for our future. Cheers erupted as the pilots climbed into their ships. Mia gave John a firm nod before boarding her fighter. The jamming device secured in its bay, Alex handed her a final checklist, double-checking every detail. You've got this, he said, his voice filled with confidence. Just stay sharp out there. Mia smiled tightly, gripping the controls. Don't worry, not letting them get close enough to try again. As the engines roared to life, the fleet ascended into the sky, disappearing into the clouds. John watched them go, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. He trusted his team, but the risks were undeniable. One misstep could mean disaster not just for the mission, but for Earth itself. Hours later, the fleet reached the edge of the solar system, where the Kellyan ships loomed like dark clouds against the backdrop of space. Their formations were loose, their numbers reduced compared to the initial invasion. Still, they posed a formidable threat. As the human fighters approached, alarms blared aboard the Kellyan vessels. Patrols scrambled to intercept. Mia led the charge, weaving through enemy fire with expert precision. Her ship darted between blasts of energy, closing the distance. To the Kellyan flagship, behind her, the rest of the fleet engaged the enemy, creating chaos that drew attention away from her mission. Explosions lit up the void as ships collided and weapons discharged. The soundless fury of battle unfolded in stark contrast to the cold emptiness of space. Activating the jammer, Mia announced over the comms, her fingers flying across the console. Low hum emanated from the device as it powered up, targeting the Kellyan ship's energy shields. Within moments, the first shield flickered and collapsed, leaving the vessel exposed. Cheers erupted from the human pilots as they seized the opportunity, firing concentrated bursts of energy at the defenseless. Targets the Kellyans responded with fury, launching waves of counterattacks. Missiles streaked across the battlefield, forcing the human fighters to dodge and evade. Despite the danger, the team held their ground, pressing the advantage created by the jamming device. Ship after ship fell victim to the combined assault, their hulls breached and their systems disabled. Back on Earth, John and Rachel monitored the battle via long-range communication arrays. Tension hung thick in the air as updates trickled in. Each report brought relief and dread in equal measure. The mission was succeeding, but the cost was high. Several human fighters had been lost, their sacrifices ensuring the survival of others. Finally, after hours of relentless combat, the tide turned decisively in humanity's favor. The Kellyan flagship, crippled by repeated strikes, exploded in a brilliant flash of light, debris scattered outward, marking the end of the enemy's command structure. Without leadership, the remaining ships broke formation, retreating deeper into space. We did it, Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face. They're running. John allowed himself a brief moment of triumph before turning his attention to the aftermath. "We won the battle," he said, his voice firm. "But the war isn't over, not until we're sure they won't come back." The surviving fighters returned to Earth victorious but weary. Their ships bore the marks of battle, and many carried injuries sustained during the fight. Their spirits were unbroken. They had proven once again that humanity was capable of standing toe-to-toe with an advanced Ali. The aftermath of the Kellyan retreat left Earth in a state of fragile calm. Cities that had once buzzed with life now lay silent, their streets littered with debris and the remnants of battle. Smoke still curled into the sky from smoldering ruins, and the scars of war were etched deeply into the land. Yet, amidst the devastation, there was a spark of hope. The resistance had proven that humanity could stand against even the most advanced enemies. Now, the hard work of rebuilding began. John Carter returned to his cabin in Montana after weeks of leading missions across the country. Though he was physically exhausted, his mind refused to rest. Images of the battles replayed in his head. Explosions, the cries of the wounded, the faces of those who hadn't made it. He felt the weight of every decision he'd made, knowing that countless lives had depended on him. But despite the toll it had taken, John couldn't bring himself to step away. There was still too much to do. Rachel Meyer stayed by his side. As determined as ever to keep the resistance alive, she organized supply runs, coordinated cleanup efforts, and helped establish safe zones for survivors. Her leadership inspired others to pitch in, no matter how small their contribution might seem. Together, they worked tirelessly to restore order to a world teetering on the edge of collapse. Meanwhile, Laura Bennett traveled across the globe, sharing her experiences aboard the Kellyan mothership and rallying people to unite under a common cause. Her story resonated deeply with those who had lost everything: family, homes, livelihoods, and gave them a reason to keep going. In towns and villages where despair had taken root, Laura's words planted seeds of hope. "We've shown them. We're not prey," she often said during her speeches. "Now we need to show ourselves what we're truly capable of." Her message reached leaders in far-off regions, sparking a global movement unlike anything Earth had seen before. Marcus Lee in Asia spearheaded reconstruction projects using salvaged Kellyan technology to build sustainable energy systems. Samantha Hayes in Europe focused on education, reopening schools and training programs to equip the next generation with skills needed to rebuild society. Even in remote areas untouched by the invasion, communities came together to support one another, realizing that humanity's strength lay in its unity. Back in the United States, John and Rachel received reports of similar efforts taking shape. They learned about farmers replanting fields, engineers repairing power grids, and doctors setting up makeshift clinics to treat the injured. So each success, no matter how small, fueled their determination to push forward. The road ahead would be long and difficult. Resources were scarce, and tensions simmered beneath the surface as people struggled to adapt to their new reality. One evening, as John and Rachel sat around a campfire outside their cabin, they discussed the future. "We've won the battle," John said, poking at the embers with a stick. "But winning the war means more than just driving the Kellyans away. It means making sure this never happens again." Rachel nodded, her gaze fixed on the flames. "Why we need to focus on rebuilding smarter, not just fixing what was broken, but building something stronger, something better." Laura joined them later that night, carrying news from abroad. She had been in contact with scientists studying the captured Kellyan technology, hoping to unlock its secrets. "They've made progress," she told them, her voice tinged with excitement. "If we can figure out how their energy systems work, we might be able to harness it for our own use. Imagine powering entire cities without relying on fossil fuels." John raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "And you trust this stuff? After everything they put us through?" "It's not about trusting them," Laura replied. "It's about learning from them. If we can adapt their technology, we'll have a fighting chance if they come back and maybe even prevent another invasion altogether." Her argument struck a chord with both John and Rachel. They realized that survival wasn't enough. Humanity needed to evolve. Over the next few weeks, they worked closely with engineers and researchers, pooling their knowledge to develop new tools and technologies. Alex Rivera played a key role in this effort, using his expertise to reverse engineer alien devices. His breakthroughs led to the creation of portable energy generators, advanced medical equipment, and communication systems that spanned continents. As these innovations spread, so did a renewed sense of purpose. People who had once felt powerless now saw themselves as agents of change. Farmers used modified machinery to cultivate barren lands, while doctors employed cutting-edge treatments to heal wounds that would have been fatal months earlier. Teachers incorporated lessons on resilience and ingenuity into their curriculums, instilling values that reflected humanity's newfound strength. But progress wasn't without its challenges. Not everyone agreed on how to move forward. Some argued that Earth should isolate itself, fortifying its borders and focusing solely on self-preservation. Others believed that humanity should reach out to other civilizations, seeking alliances and learning from their experiences. Debates raged in makeshift town halls and online forums, highlighting the diversity of perspectives that define the human race. John found himself caught in the middle of these discussions. As a leader of the resistance, his opinions carried weight, but he struggled to reconcile conflicting viewpoints. On one hand, he understood the fear-driving calls for isolation. The scars of the Kellyan invasion were still fresh, and many worried that opening Earth to outsiders would invite further danger. On the other hand, he recognized the potential benefits of cooperation. Humanity had already proven it could adapt and innovate. Why not share that knowledge with others? Rachel encouraged him to listen rather than dictate. You don't have to have all the answers, she reminded him. Sometimes the best thing you can do is give people a voice. Taking her advice to heart, John organized a series of meetings to gather input from survivors across the country. He listened patiently as people shared their hopes, fears, and ideas for the future. What emerged was a patchwork of solutions tailored to local needs, united by a shared commitment to resilience and collaboration. Laura also played a crucial role in shaping humanity's response to the Kellyan threat. Drawing on her time aboard the mothership, she proposed establishing a global defense network designed to monitor space for signs of incoming threats. Using repurposed Kellyan sensors and communication arrays, the system would provide early warnings of potential invasions, giving Earth time to prepare. Her proposal gained widespread support. Construction began on observation stations scattered across the planet. While these efforts took shape, stories of individual heroism continued to inspire. In Chicago, a young girl named Emily rebuilt her family's bakery using salvaged materials, feeding hundreds of hungry neighbors. In Tokyo, a retired mechanic named Kenji converted abandoned cars into mobile shelters for displaced families. And in London, a group of artists painted murals on crumbling walls, transforming ruins into symbols of hope and renewal. These acts of kindness reminded humanity of its capacity for compassion. Even in the darkest times, they served as a counterbalance to the anger and grief that lingered in the wake of the invasion. Slowly but surely, life began to return to normal, or at least a version of normal, shaped by hardship and perseverance. Yet, despite the progress, questions remained. Why had the Kellyans invaded Earth? What drove them to view humans as prey? Laura's suspicions about their motivations grew stronger as she analyzed data recovered from the mothership. She discovered evidence suggesting that the Kellyans' home galaxy was dying, forcing them to seek refuge elsewhere. Their actions, though brutal, were born of desperation rather than malice. This revelation complicated humanity's understanding of the conflict. Were the Kellyans truly villains, or were they victims of circumstance? Laura wrestled with these questions, unsure of the answers. She shared her findings with John and Rachel, sparking a heated debate. If they were desperate, does that excuse what they did? Rachel asked, her tone sharp. Does it make it okay to kidnap people, destroy cities, and treat us like animals? No, John replied firmly. But it changes how we think about them. If they come back, we'll have to decide whether to fight or negotiate. It's understanding them might be our best chance at lasting peace. Laura nodded, her expression thoughtful. Maybe the real challenge isn't defeating them, it's finding a way to coexist. If we can learn from each other, we might avoid repeating the same mistakes. Their conversation ended without resolution, but it planted a seed of possibility. Perhaps humanity's greatest test wasn't proving its strength, it was demonstrating its ability to forgive, to empathize, and to grow. As the months passed, Earth began to heal. Buildings rose from the ashes, crops sprouted in once barren fields, and laughter returned to playgrounds. Survivors formed tight-knit communities, bound together by shared experiences and a collective determination to thrive. Of war would never fully fade. They served as reminders of what humanity had overcome, what it could achieve when united in the distance. The stars twinkled in the night sky, a constant reminder of the vast universe beyond Earth. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged victorious, proving that even in the Resistance's assault on the Kellian forces had shifted the balance of power, but the fight was far from over. Each victory came at a cost, and the survivors knew that their efforts were merely chipping away at the invaders' strength. The destruction of the energy hubs and communication towers had disrupted the Kellians' operations. But it wasn't enough to drive them away. Humanity needed a decisive blow, one that would strike at the very core of the alien invasion. Laura's team aboard the commandeered Kellian fighters approached the mothership with both fear and determination etched into their faces. The massive vessel loomed ahead of them, its sleek metallic surface reflecting the light of distant stars. It was a fortress in space, bristling with weapons and defended by swarms of smaller ships. As they drew closer, Alex adjusted the controls. Mimicking the signals used by Kellian vessels to avoid detection, for now they remained undetected, blending in among the enemy craft. Inside the cockpit, Laura clenched her fists tightly, trying to steady her breathing. She had spent countless hours studying the layout of the mothership during her captivity, memorizing every corridor, every system, and every potential weak point. But knowing something in theory was different from experiencing it firsthand. The thought of stepping back onto that ship filled her with dread, yet she pushed the fear aside. Too much depended on their success. As they neared the docking bay, alarms began to blare. Their disguise had failed. A squadron of Kellian fighters swooped in, firing bursts of energy that lit up the void of space. Alex maneuvered the ship with skill, dodging blasts while returning fire. "Hold on," shouted, as the ship rocked violently from an explosion nearby. The rest of the team gripped their seats, bracing for impact. Bullets zipped past the cockpit window, narrowly missing. "We're not going to make it if we keep this up," Laura said through gritted teeth. She glanced at the navigation panel, calculating their options. "There's another entrance and maintenance hatch on the underside of the ship. If we can get there, we might be able to slip inside unnoticed." Alex nodded, banking the ship sharply and diving beneath the mothership. The move caught the pursuing fighters off guard, giving them a brief window of opportunity. He guided the ship toward the hatch, deploying grappling hooks to secure their position. "Let's go," he said, as the engines powered down. "Don't have much time." The team disembarked quickly, armed with modified Kellion weapons and explosives. Laura led the way, her mind racing as she recalled the path to the central command center. The corridors of the ship were eerily familiar, the cold glow of the walls sending shivers down her spine. Every corner seemed to hold a memory of her captivity, the pain of experiments. The helplessness of being restrained, the anger at being treated like nothing more than a specimen. Behind her, Alex and the others followed closely, their footsteps echoing softly against the metallic floors. They moved cautiously, avoiding patrols of Kellion soldiers whenever possible. When confrontation was unavoidable, they fought fiercely, relying on teamwork to overcome superior numbers. Laura's knowledge of the ship proved invaluable. She directed the team through shortcuts and hidden passages. Minimizing their exposure to danger, their progress was slow but steady. Along the way, they encountered other human prisoners, emaciated and terrified, but alive. Laura hesitated only, briefly, before deciding to free them. "We can't leave them here," she told the team. They deserve a chance to fight back too. With each liberated captive, their numbers grew, bolstering their strength and resolve. Some of the freed prisoners joined the mission, eager to contribute to the effort, while others stayed behind to sabotage key systems. Finally, after what felt like hours of navigating the labyrinthine ship, they reached the central command center. The room was vast, filled with glowing consoles and towering screens displaying maps of Earth and troop movements. At the heart of it all stood Zorak, the Kellian leader, his insect-like form radiating authority. Surrounding him were several high-ranking officers, their clicking voices filling the air as they coordinated the invasion. Laura signaled for the team to hold their positions, waiting for the right moment to strike. They couldn't afford to fail, not here, not now. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, raising her weapon. "This ends today," she declared, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The Kellians turned in unison, their multifaceted eyes locking onto the intruders. Zorak clicked sharply, issuing orders to his subordinates. Within seconds, the room erupted into chaos. Energy blasts illuminated the air as both sides exchanged fire. Laura ducked behind a console, returning shots with precision. Her aim was true, striking down one Kellian after another. Beside her, Alex worked frantically to disable the ship's primary power source, bypassing layers of security protocols. The battle raged on, the sound of explosions reverberating through the chamber. One by one, the Kellian officers fell, overwhelmed. By the ferocity of the human assault, Zorak retreated to a raised platform, activating a protective shield around himself. From his position, he unleashed a barrage of attacks, forcing the team to scatter. Laura gritted her teeth, searching for a way to break through his defenses. "Alex, how much longer?" "Gah!" she shouted over the din of combat. "Almost there," he replied, his fingers flying across the console. "Just need a few more seconds." Rachel appeared at Laura's side, tossing her a small explosive device. "Take him out," she urged. "I'll cover you." Nodding, Laura sprinted toward Zorak, weaving between blasts of energy. She hurled the explosive at the base of his platform, triggering a chain reaction that shattered the shield. Before Zorak could react, Laura fired a final shot, hitting him squarely in the chest. The Kellian leader collapsed, his body convulsing as sparks flew from his exoskeleton. With Zorak defeated, the remaining Kellians faltered, their coordination crumbling without their leader's guidance. Alex completed his task just moments later, shutting down the mothership's power core. The lights flickered and dimmed, plunging the room into darkness. Emergency systems kicked in, casting a faint red glow over the scene. "We did it, Laura," whispered, sinking to her knees in exhaustion. Around her, the team cheered, their voices hoarse but triumphant. For the first time in months, hope burned brightly within them. Back on Earth, the effects of the mothership's shutdown rippled outward. Without centralized command, the Kellion forces descended into disarray. Ground troops abandoned their posts, retreating to their ships in a desperate attempt to regroup. In cities and towns across the planet, survivors emerged from hiding, reclaiming their homes and neighborhoods. Fires still smoldered in the distance, and the scars of war were everywhere. But the tide had turned. John and Rachel received word of the success via a hastily assembled radio broadcast. Tears streamed down Rachel's face as she listened to Laura's voice crackling through the static. "The mothership is disabled," Laura reported. "Zorak is dead. The Kellians are falling back." John allowed himself a rare smile, clapping his hands together in triumph. "We actually did it," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Against all odds, we beat them." But even in victory, there was no time to rest. Kellians weren't gone. They were retreating, regrouping. Humanity had won a battle, but the war was far from over. John gathered his team, preparing for whatever came next. Supplies were low, injuries were mounting, and the task of rebuilding loomed large. Yet, despite the challenges, the survivors refused to give up. They had proven that humans were capable of standing toe-to-toe with an advanced alien race and winning. In the days that followed, stories of the resistance spread far and wide, People spoke of John Carter, the former Marine who had led guerrilla attacks in the wilderness. They praised Rachel Meyer, whose leadership had united scattered survivors under a common cause. And they celebrated Dr. Laura Bennett, the astrophysicist, who had risked everything to bring down the Kellyan mothership. These individuals, once ordinary citizens, had become symbols of resilience and courage. As humanity began the long process of recovery, a new spirit of unity took root. Governments set aside old rivalries to work together, pooling resources and expertise to rebuild shattered cities and heal wounded communities. Scientists and engineers collaborated to study captured Kellyan technology, hoping to unlock its secrets and use it for Earth's benefit. Farmers planted crops in fields reclaimed from ruins, and teachers reopened schools and makeshift classrooms. Life went on, fragile but determined, yet amidst the rebuilding, questions lingered. Why had the Kellyans invaded Earth? What drove them? To view humans as prey? And most importantly, would they return? Laura harbored suspicions that the Kellyans' actions were motivated by desperation rather than malice. During her time aboard the mothership, she had glimpsed fragments of data suggesting that their own galaxy was dying, forcing them to seek refuge elsewhere. If true, it complicated the narrative of good versus evil. Perhaps the Kellyans weren't monsters, they were survivors, driven to extreme measures by circumstance. Laura shared these thoughts with John and Rachel during a quiet evening at the camp. The three sat around a campfire, staring into the flames as they discussed the future. If we ever meet, the resistance had grown stronger with each passing day. Word of their efforts spread like wildfire, carried by survivors fleeing the cities and towns now under Kellyan control. People traveled great distances to join John, Rachel, and Alex in their fight against the invaders. Some came with weapons, others with skills or supplies, but all shared a common goal: to reclaim Earth from the alien oppressors. The one small group of survivors had transformed into a formidable force. United by desperation and hope, Laura's arrival brought a new level of strategy to their operations. She spent hours poring over maps with John and Rachel, pointing out key locations where the Kellyans were most vulnerable. Her knowledge of the aliens' centralized command structure gave them an edge. If they could disrupt the flow of orders from the mothership, they might throw the entire invasion into chaos. Laura also explained how the Kellyans relied on energy hubs scattered across the planet to power their ships and equipment. Destroying these hubs would cripple their ability to operate effectively. Armed with this information, the Resistance began planning their largest operation yet. They called it Operation Eclipse, a coordinated attack designed to strike multiple targets simultaneously. The plan was ambitious, requiring precise timing and flawless execution. Each team would focus on a specific objective: sabotage supply lines, disable communication towers, and destroy energy hubs. At the heart of the operation was a daring mission to infiltrate the Kellyan mothership itself. Laura insisted that taking down the central command center aboard the ship would deal a critical blow to the invaders. John took charge of organizing the teams, dividing the survivors based on their strengths. Those with combat experience, like himself and Rachel, led assault squads tasked with engaging Kellyan forces head-on. Others with technical expertise, such as Alex, worked on modifying alien weapons and crafting explosives. Supplies were gathered from abandoned military bases and hidden bunkers, while volunteers scouted enemy positions to gather intelligence. Every member of the Resistance played a role, no matter how small, contributing to the greater effort. As the days counted down to the operation, tension filled the camp. The survivors trained tirelessly, running drills and practicing maneuvers until they were second nature. Fires burned late into the night as people sharpened blades, checked ammunition, and prepared themselves mentally for what lay ahead. Conversations grew quieter, replaced by a sense of purpose that bonded everyone together. Even those who had been strangers weeks earlier now felt like family, bound by the shared struggle for survival. On the eve of Operation Eclipse, John called a meeting to address the group. Standing before the assembled survivors, he spoke with a calm determination that inspired confidence. Tomorrow, We show the Kellians what we're made of, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. They think we're weak, that we'll roll over and let them take whatever they want. But we're not animals. We're humans. And we don't back down. His words drew cheers from the crowd, lifting spirits and reinforcing their resolve. Rachel added her thoughts, emphasizing the importance of teamwork. We've come too far to fail now, she reminded them. Stick to the plan, watch each other's backs, and remember why we're doing this. For our families, for our homes, for Earth. Speech struck a chord especially with those who had lost loved ones to the invaders. Tears welled up in some eyes. But they were tears of determination rather than despair. Alex approached John after the meeting, holding a modified alien weapon he'd been working on. This should work, he said, handing it over. It's not perfect, but it's stable enough for combat. I've adjusted the power settings so it won't overheat as easily. John inspected the device, nodding in approval. It looked nothing like the crude rifles they'd started with. Sleek and compact, it hummed softly with energy. Good work, he told Alex. Make sure everyone gets one before we move out. That night, as the camp settled into an uneasy silence, Laura sat alone near the edge of the valley, staring up at the stars. The sight of the Kellian ships hovering above Earth filled her with anger and sadness.
Ow.
Be so cruel? She thought about the experiments she'd endured aboard the mothership, the pain and fear that still lingered in her mind. But she also remembered the bravery of the prisoners who had fought alongside her during the escape. Humans weren't perfect. They were flawed, messy, and often divided, but they possessed something the Kellians lacked: resilience. No matter how dire the situation, they found ways to adapt, to survive, to fight back. Dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The resistance moved quickly, breaking camp and loading supplies onto trucks and jeeps. Teams split off in different directions, heading toward their assigned targets. John led the main assault squad, accompanied by Rachel and a dozen others. Their destination was a heavily guarded Kellian outpost located near the ruins of what was once Denver. Intelligence suggested it housed one of the energy hubs Laura had identified. The journey was tense, every sound making them flinch. Birds chirped overhead, and the wind rustled through the trees. But none of it could mask the constant hum of Kellion drones patrolling the skies. John signaled for the group to stop whenever they heard the telltale whine of engines crouching low until the danger passed. Progress was slow, but caution was essential. One wrong move could alert the Kellions and ruin the entire operation. By midday, they reached the outskirts of the outpost. From their vantage point atop a hill, they could see the sprawling complex below. Massive domes glowed faintly, housing the energy hub that powered the surrounding area. Armed Kellion soldiers patrolled the perimeter, their insect-like bodies moving with mechanical precision. Watchtowers loomed high above the ground, equipped with cannons capable of vaporizing anything within range. John turned to his team, laying out the plan. We'll split into 2 groups, he whispered. Rachel, you take half the squad and circle around to the east. Create a diversion, make some noise, draw their attention away from the main entrance. Once they're distracted, my group will sneak in and plant the explosives. Got it. Everyone nodded, their faces grim but focused. There was no room for error. Failure meant death. Rachel's team moved first, creeping through the dense underbrush until they reached their position. Using rocks and debris, they began creating disturbance-eyes throwing objects to mimic human movement, setting off small charges to create flashes of light. The ruse worked. The Kellions turned their attention toward the commotion, leaving the main gate relatively unguarded. Seizing the opportunity, John's team slipped through the opening, sticking close to the shadows as they approached the energy hub. Inside the dome, the air buzzed with electricity. Thick cables snaked along the walls, pulsing with energy. Alex guided the team to the core, a massive sphere suspended in the center of the room. This is it, he said, pulling out a device he'd rigged earlier. Place these charges here. Here and here, he instructed, pointing to specific points on the sphere. Once they're set, We've got 10 minutes to get clear." Working quickly, the team planted the explosives, ensuring each charge was securely attached. Sweat dripped down their faces as they labored under the pressure of time. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder as Rachel's diversion escalated. Gunfire echoed through the air, followed by the sharp crackle of Kellyan weapons. John glanced at his watch, counting down the seconds until they could retreat. With the charges in place, they made their way back toward the exit. Just as they reached the doorway, a patrol of Kellyan soldiers appeared, blocking their path. John raised his weapon, firing a burst of energy that sent the aliens stumbling backward. The rest of the team followed suit, unleashing a barrage of shots to hold them off. Bullets ricocheted off metallic exoskeletons, but the resistance fighters pressed forward, unwilling to give up. "Move," John shouted, pushing his team ahead of him. They sprinted through the compound, dodging blasts of energy as alarms blared throughout the facility. Behind them, the first explosion rocked the ground, sending shockwaves rippling outward. The energy hub collapsed in a brilliant flash of light, its destruction severing the Kellyans' connection to the mothership. Cheers erupted from Rachel's team as they regrouped with John's squad, their victory hard won but undeniable. Elsewhere, similar successes were unfolding. Marcus Lee's guerrilla tactics disrupted supply convoys, leaving Kellyan forces stranded without reinforcements. Samantha Hayes' engineers disabled communication towers, cutting off vital links between ground troops and the mothership. Each victory, no matter how small, contributed to the larger goal of weakening the invaders. But the most daring mission of all was yet to come. High above Earth, Laura guided a team of pilots, including Alexan-commandeered Kellyan fighters, toward the mothership. Their objective was clear: infiltrate the central command center and disable the ship's primary power source. The journey was fraught with peril as they navigated through swarms of enemy vessels determined to stop them. Explosions lit up the darkness of space as dogfights erupted around them. Despite the odds, the team pressed on, driven by the knowledge that humanity's future depended on their success. As they breached the hull of the mothership, Laura couldn't help but feel a surge of PR. The Kellyans wasted no time in asserting their dominance over Earth. Within days of their arrival, massive ships descended upon major cities worldwide, casting ominous shadows over the landscape. The sheer size of these vessels was enough to send shockwaves through even the most skeptical minds. In New York City, the towering skyscrapers seemed dwarfed by the alien craft hovering above them. In Tokyo, the neon lights flickered and died as electromagnetic pulses disabled entire power grids. And in London, centuries-old landmarks crumbled under the weight of sonic booms that accompanied the ship's descent. People ran in terror as beams of light shot down from the sky, snatching individuals off the streets with horrifying precision. No one was safe. Not children playing in parks, not workers commuting home, not families gathered around dinner tables. The Kellyans showed no mercy, treating humanity like cattle being herded into pens. Those who resisted were vaporized instantly, their screams cut short by bursts of energy. Governments scrambled to respond, but their weapons proved useless against the advanced technology of the invaders. Fighter jets were swatted out of the air like flies. Missiles exploded harmlessly against invisible shields surrounding the wall. Alien ships in rural Montana, John Carter watched the chaos unfold on a small battery-powered radio he kept at his cabin. Reports poured in from across the country, painting a grim picture of humanity's plight. Despite the distance between him and the cities, John knew it was only a matter of time before the Kellyans reached his remote corner of the world. He tightened his grip on his rifle and scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of movement. The forest had grown eerily quiet, as if even the animals sensed the danger looming overhead. John wasn't alone for long. Over the next few days, more survivors trickled into the woods, drawn by rumors of a man preparing to fight back. Among them was Rachel Meyer, a woman whose sharp eyes and steady hands hinted at a life shaped by hardship. She carried little with her. Backpack filled with supplies and a knife strapped to her belt, but her determination made her stand out. When she introduced herself, John could see the fire in her gaze. "I'm not running anymore," she said firmly. "If we're going to survive this, we need to hit them where it hurts." Rachel explained that her family had been taken during one of the initial abductions. She'd managed to evade capture by hiding in an abandoned subway tunnel, but the loss weighed heavily on her. Her voice cracked as she described watching helplessly as her younger brother was pulled into the sky. "They didn't even hesitate," she whispered. "Just took him." John nodded silently, understanding the pain without needing to hear more. He'd lost people to friends in the military, comrades who hadn't made it back. Grief bonded them in ways words never could. Together, John and Rachel began organizing the scattered survivors into a cohesive group. They set up camp in a secluded valley surrounded by dense trees and steep cliffs, making it difficult for the Kellians to locate them. Using materials scavenged from nearby farms and hunting cabins, they constructed makeshift shelters and fortified their position. John taught the others how to set traps using rope, branches, and sharpened stakes. He showed them how to camouflage themselves in the forest, blending into the environment to avoid detection. Rachel, meanwhile, focused on logistics, assigning tasks based on each person's skills and strengths. Some gathered food and water, while others stood guard or worked on repairing old vehicles they hoped to use for transport. Their efforts paid off when they intercepted a Kellyan scout ship that crash-landed near their camp. The vessel had been damaged during a skirmish with human forces in a nearby town, and its crew lay dead inside. Though none of the survivors dared approach it at first, curiosity eventually got the better of them. John led the way, his rifle raised as he cautiously stepped aboard. The interior of the ship was unlike anything he'd ever seen smooth. Metallic walls glowed faintly, and strange symbols pulsed with light. Consoles hummed softly, and tubes filled with glowing liquid lined the walls. It was here that they discovered Alex Rivera, a young man who had been experimenting with reverse engineering alien tech before the invasion. Alex had been part of a secret government project, tasked with studying unidentified flying objects. But when the Kellians attacked, he fled with what little knowledge he'd gained. Now trapped in the wreckage of the scout ship, he offered his expertise to John and Rachel. "We can use this," he said, gesturing to the alien equipment. "If we figure out how it works, we might be able to turn their own weapons against them." Alex's arrival marked a turning point for the resistance. With his help, they began modifying the alien technology to suit their needs. They salvaged energy cells from the ship and used them to power rudimentary versions of Kellyan weapons. These new tools gave them a fighting chance against the invaders, though they came with risks. The energy blasts were unstable, often overheating and causing injuries. Still, the survivors were willing to take the gamble. Anything was better than facing the Kellians unarmed. Meanwhile, aboard one of the alien motherships orbiting Earth, Dr. Laura Bennett endured horrors beyond imagination. After being abducted, she found herself strapped to a cold metal table, surrounded by clicking insect-like creatures. The Kellians moved with mechanical precision, probing her body with instruments that burned and stung. Each experiment left her weaker, yet she refused to give up. Drawing on years of scientific training, she observed everything: their movements, their tools, the patterns in which they operated. She memorized the layout of the ship and noted the locations of key systems, such as the central power core and communication arrays. Laura soon realized that the Kellians viewed humans as both fascinating and expendable. Their experiments aimed to understand human biology, particularly the resilience and adaptability that allowed the species to thrive despite its flaws. To the Kellians, humanity's unpredictability was both intriguing and unsettling. During brief moments of lucidity between tests, Laura shared her observations with the other captives. Together, they devised a plan to escape. It was risky. Staying meant certain death. The opportunity came when a malfunction caused a temporary disruption in the ship's security protocols. Seizing the moment, Laura led a group of prisoners through dimly lit corridors, avoiding patrols of Kellian guards. They moved quickly, guided by Laura's mental map of the ship. Along the way, they freed other captives, swelling their numbers until they resembled a ragtag army. Clashes erupted as they encountered resistance, but the element of surprise gave them the upper hand. Armed with stolen Kellyan weapons, they fought their way toward the hangar bay, where escape pods awaited. Back on Earth, John and Rachel received word of the breakout via a smuggled message sent by one of the escaped prisoners. The news reignited their hope and reinforced their resolve. If humans could rebel aboard the Kellyan ships, then they could do the same on the ground. Inspired by Laura's bravery, John proposed a bold plan, a coordinated attack on multiple Kellyan outposts simultaneously. By hitting several targets at once, they could stretch the invaders' resources thin and create openings for larger operations. Rachel agreed, but she insisted on gathering more allies first. Word of the resistance spread quickly, thanks to underground networks established by survivors. Leaders emerged in different regions, each rallying their communities to join the fight. In Asia, Marcus Lee organized guerrilla attacks against supply convoys, disrupting the flow of resources to Kellyan bases. In Europe, Samantha Hayes mobilized engineers and scientists to develop countermeasures against alien technology. Slowly but surely, humanity began to unite under a single cause: survival. As preparations for the assault intensified, Laura finally returned to Earth. She parachuted into a remote area near John and Rachel's camp, carrying vital information about the Kellyans' weaknesses. Exhausted but determined, she recounted her ordeal aboard the mothership and shared details about their centralized command structure. The Kellyans relied heavily on their leaders to coordinate attacks and maintain order. If the resistance could eliminate key figures within the hierarchy, it might cripple the entire operation. John listened intently, his mind racing with possibilities. For months, he'd dreamed of striking a decisive blow against the invaders. Now, with Laura's insights, that dream felt within reach. He turned to Rachel and Alex, who nodded in agreement. It was time to take the fight to the Kellyans. The stage was set for humanity's greatest challenge yet, against overwhelming odds. Ordinary men and women prepared to stand toe-to-toe with an enemy that saw them as nothing more than prey. But John, Laura, Rachel, and countless others had proven one thing already. Humans were far more dangerous than anyone, including the Kellyans, had anticipated. In a distant part of the galaxy, far beyond the reach of human telescopes and imagination, there existed a council known as the Kellis. This council was made up of beings who considered themselves superior to all other life forms. They traveled from planet to planet, taking what they wanted and enslaving those they deemed unworthy. To them, weaker species were nothing more than prey resources to be used and discarded. Their arrogance blinded them to the possibility that any race could pose a real threat. On one of their routine scouting missions, Kellyans discovered Earth. From their advanced ships hovering high above the atmosphere, they observed humanity through surveillance drones. What they saw confirmed their assumptions. Humans were divided, chaotic, and technologically primitive compared to the Kellyans. Zarak, the leader of the council, scoffed at the sight of bustling cities, arguing over borders and struggling with basic challenges like hunger and disease. They are no better than animals, he declared, dismissing the idea that humans might have any value beyond being harvested for labor or experiments. Unbeknownst to the Kellyans, however, there were individuals on Earth who would soon prove them wrong. In the rugged wilderness of Montana, John Carter lived a quiet life away from the noise of civilization. Former Marine, John had chosen solitude after leaving the military, building himself a small cabin surrounded by dense forests and towering mountains. He spent his days hunting, fishing, and preparing for emergencies. Years of survival training had taught him how to read the signs of nature, and lately something felt off. Strange lights had been appearing in the night sky, moving silently across the horizon. At first, John thought it might be satellites or weather phenomena. But when the lights began hovering directly over his property, he knew it wasn't natural. One chilly evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line, John spotted one of the glowing objects again. It hovered low enough that he could hear a faint hum emanating from it. Gripping his rifle tightly, he stepped outside to investigate. The light was blinding, forcing him to shield his eyes. Suddenly, a beam shot down from the object, narrowly missing him. Trees shook violently as if caught in an invisible storm. John dove behind a fallen log just in time to avoid another blast. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized this. Wasn't some government experiment it was alien? The next morning, John found evidence of the encounter scattered around his land. Scorch marks blackened the ground where the beam had struck, and several trees were completely uprooted. Tracks unlike anything he'd ever seen marred the soil. Whatever these creatures were, they weren't friendly. Determined to protect his home, John began fortifying his cabin. He set traps along the perimeter, using materials he had on hand to create makeshift defenses. Over the following days, he kept watch from his rooftop, scanning the skies with binoculars. Each night, the lights returned, but they stayed farther away, as though observing him. While John prepared for battle in the wilderness, thousands of miles away in Chicago, Dr. Laura Bennett sat hunched over her desk at the university's astrophysics lab. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she analyzed data streaming in from deep space telescopes. For weeks, she'd been tracking an unusual signal, a series of pulses that repeated in a pattern too precise to be random. Most scientists dismissed it as interference, but Laura believed it was something more. She suspected it might be a message, perhaps even proof of extraterrestrial intelligence. Her suspicions grew stronger when the signal suddenly changed. Instead of repeating at regular intervals, it now contained bursts of static followed by eerie silence. Laura worked tirelessly to decode it, running simulations and cross-referencing frequencies. Late one night, as rain lashed against the windows, she finally cracked part of the code. The signal wasn't just a message, it was a map, and the coordinates led straight to Earth. Before Laura could share her findings with anyone, strange things started happening in Chicago. People reported seeing metallic objects descending from the sky, accompanied by deafening booms. Neighborhoods were plunged into darkness as power grids failed without explanation. Panic spread quickly, and social media lit up with videos of the mysterious crafts. Laura watched the chaos unfold from her apartment window, feeling a sinking sensation in her stomach. The pieces were falling into place, and none of it boded well for humanity. As the days passed, reports of abductions flooded the news. Witnesses described beams of light snatching people off the streets, pulling them into the air like helpless insects. Governments scrambled to respond, but their efforts were futile against such advanced technology. Fighter jets launched intercept missions, only to be disabled mid-air by unknown forces. Humanity was utterly unprepared for what was happening. For John, the situation became personal when he ventured into town to gather supplies. The once bustling streets were eerily empty, shops boarded up and vehicles abandoned, posters plastered. On lampposts warned residents to stay indoors after dark. John tried to warn the few people he encountered about the danger, but most dismissed him as paranoid. Frustrated, he loaded his truck with food, ammunition, and medical supplies before heading back to his cabin. On the way, he noticed fresh tire tracks leading into the forest. Someone or something was nearby. That night, John's worst fears were realized. As he patrolled the edges of his property, he stumbled upon a group of survivors hiding in a cave. Among them was Rachel Meyer, a sharp-witted woman with a knack for leadership. She explained that her family had been taken by the aliens, and she'd been searching for answers ever since. Together, they decided to form a resistance cell, determined to fight back against the invaders. With John's combat skills and Rachel's strategic mind, they began organizing raids and rescuing captives whenever possible. Meanwhile, Laura found herself among the abducted. One evening, as she walked home from the lab, a bright light engulfed her. Before she could react, she felt herself lifted off the ground and pulled into a cold metallic chamber aboard one of the alien ships. Inside, she saw rows of terrified humans strapped to tables, subjected to painful experiments. The Kellians moved methodically, their insect-like bodies clicking in worry as they worked. Laura's scientific curiosity kicked in, despite her fear. She studied everything she could, memorizing details about their tools and procedures. If she survived this ordeal, she vowed to use that knowledge to help humanity fight back. Back on Earth, John and Rachel's resistance efforts gained momentum. Word spread among the scattered groups of survivors, and more people joined their cause. They salvaged weapons from abandoned military bases and repurposed everyday items into tools of war. Though outnumbered and outgunned, they refused to give up. Every victory, no matter how small, fueled their determination to reclaim their planet. As the conflict escalated, both sides began to realize the true stakes of this war. For the Kellians, Earth represented a vital resource, a stepping stone toward escaping their own dying galaxy. For humanity, it was a fight for survival, a chance to prove that they were more than the fragile, divided species the Kellians believed them to be, and somewhere in the middle of it all, ordinary people like John, Laura, and Rachel stood ready to defy the odds and show the universe what humans were truly capable of.